Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanwo TV. Well, if you watch this channel regularly, you'll know that in July of last year, a good friend of mine, the researcher, Dr. Nick Colostrum, was here in Oxford doing a lecture on the 10th anniversary of the 7/7 bombing, which I managed to film. There's a link in the description box to that. And, well, he's back. He's back in Oxford, and he's done a live lecture on a very different subject. And I've managed to film it, and that's what you're going to be watching in a minute. Now, the subject he's talking about this time is based on a book that he's written, and it covers a very, very unusual topic, which if you're new to it, you might find it a bit too incredulous to be real. Simply because it's so far out, the emotional reaction, emotional reflex against it. This is to do with the Beatles, the band, the Beatles, of course the biggest band in history, the Fab Four, whatever you want to call them. I think everyone's heard their songs, they're all over the place. Even if you're too young to have actually been around when they were around, like I am. In fact, my daughter loves the Beatles too. She's only 21, but she's a big Beatles fan. I think they'll be around forever. But anyway, there's a rumour going round, it's called an urban legend, apparently, that in 1966 Paul McCartney died and he was replaced by a double. It was done secretly, it was done quietly. Brian Epstein, their manager, and a few other people, they got together and they basically brought in an imposter, an actor, to play Paul. They say, you're going to be Paul McCartney. And he did, and he was Paul McCartney, and still is. To this day, the man we call Paul McCartney is really this double, this imposter. Now, I wrote an article about this in 2008. I'm not going to put a link in the description box because I've changed my mind on quite a lot of it since then, as you do after 8 years. It's a funny thing, because this is not a new idea. This has come about quite recently. But Nick Colostrum has actually he's turned a pair of fresh eyes on this, and he's come up with some new information, which I think reopens the case. He's also the first British researcher to write about this, because all the people who've covered this so far have been Americans. So I'm very, very interested to hear what he has to say. I'm very much looking forward to his lecture, and I've now got to go and meet him at the station, because he's coming to my train from London, where he lives, and we're going to go out, have a meal, and then we're going to go to the venue, which is, like before, it's the Albion Beatnik Bookshop. So if you care to accompany me, we shall head there right now. And here is the venue, Hapanwo TV viewers, the Albion Beatnik Bookshop. There it is, albionbeatnik.co.uk, there's the phone number, and you can go in here, you can get cafe, there's tea, coffee of all kinds, and there's all kinds of, you can go on these tours as well, these Oxford Ghost tours, they organise these. Now I'll tell you what, if you're a reader, you could really misspend your youth in this shop. It is a shop with books everywhere, and the shelves are full, so they pile them up on the floor, and it's amazing. Amazing place.
Welcome. I'd like to welcome Nicholas Colostrum this evening, a well-known contrarian thinker whose latest book is The Life and Death of Paul McCartney. So welcome, Nicholas.
Well, it's a thrill. And it's a thrill to be at the Albion Beatnik Bookshop in Oxford with this kind of delightful subject. I've done other conspiracy stuff in the past, which is kind of fairly dark and often leaves people feeling a bit helpless. And this is a subject about human identity and transformation. And it's also, in a rather glorious way, about the swinging 60s, about a period of human optimism around 1966, 1967, the late 60s, that everybody likes to remember. And partly the reason we like to remember it is the vividness of the amazing music that the Beatles came out with. Okay, here's Sgt. Pepper, then a few years later, here's Abbey Road, and basically any old-timer remembers this. It's a shared culture. which we don't really have these days. Okay, you've got all sorts of multimedia, different songs that come and go very quickly, and we forget about them. But you can talk to people about the songs on Abbey Road and Sgt. Pepper, and when you do that, you activate a shared culture. Now, when I first heard somebody talks about death and replacement of Paul McCartney, I can remember how annoyed I was. Oh, what bloody nonsense is this, you know? And it's a stressful concept. It kind of hits you. The idea that almost the most filmed and photographed person in the modern world, or together with Bob Dylan maybe, might have changed. Could the Empire switch him over? Does that sort of thing happen? In what way could it possibly have happened? That can seem outrageous. And as Dennis said to me a minute ago, you've got the brilliantly talented Paul McCartney, the one and only the one and only James Paul McCartney, who got Beatlemania going. And then you get somebody who could do something rather similar, but had a different kind of genius. And is it possible that they are two different people, or are we just dreaming up the whole thing? Well, for 3 years, let's remember, the world was in the grip of Beatlemania. 63 to 66, it was all around planet Earth, Beatles songs, the Fab Four, and practically any radio you switch on, you'd have these amazing songs, and it was a new music of youth, the raw, fiery optimism of youth. Conscription had been abolished, the pill was here, but so for having fun in relationships, so there was a sense of release and of gladness, and these four lads from Liverpool had this tremendous integrity and togetherness. Okay, and that then terminated after the last American tour in August '66. Okay, suddenly the world's most famous band never did another concert, never sold another ticket, only did studio albums. Quite suddenly. And I'm saying that that this was a catastrophe where I can't tell you all the details that you need to know, you can reasonably demand to know. I can't tell you all those details, but there was a sense that the show had to go on. The world's best band having a massive impact on Britain's balance of payments and exports. The Wilson government said the show must go on. And we can't have girls committing suicide all over the world because their darling Paul has passed away. We don't want a story of a bloody car accident. Did he drive too far in his super duper Aston Martin car one night? Well, obviously the last American tour was stressful, and Lennon's Jesus Christ stuff, you know. And then they got back, and I found a nice interview with New Musical Express with Paul, done in the first week of September, published on the 11th, chatting with Penny Valentine, doing an interview, a nice brief rap that Paul used to do, and he was perfectly chirpy, no hint of the band packing up, what are their future plans, talking about Revolver, the amazing Revolver just went platinum, and that was their 20th platinum disc they'd had. I mean, has any young 24-year-old ever achieved so much in the history of this country? Or has he ever done so much for his country at the mere age of 24 years? Let's just put that question for a minute. And the Music Express awards ceremony was coming out. Paul was getting Best Vocalist, all sorts of awards, and the awards were due to be given out on the 13th of September. And in London, the newly constructed Post Office Tower was a groovy place to meet and have meals and stuff, you know. And that's where the award ceremony is going to be. And Tom Jones had knocked Cliff Richard off the pedestal for top vocalist. He got the award, and that was where it was all due to happen. Now, did it happen? I argue that by then the catastrophe had happened. Examining all the reports, and let me say, the reason my book might be better than any others on the subject is that I have access to a comprehensive newspaper archive in the British Library. I can search through all media archives quite easily, so I don't rely on rumour and gossip, or what other people have said, with the exception of a few American sources. I can get all the sources and compare them, and by the way, other books on the subject are all American. We'll see in a minute. The whole Poison thing blossomed in America, and this I decided, well, I may not be a great expert on the Beatles, I'm certainly not, but it's time we had an English book on the subject. So that's what I tried to do. So on the September 13th, what happened? Well, there's no credible report of anybody being in that post office tower at all. And they're rather fiddled-looking pictures. I think the pictures are fiddled and fake, without going into details. For example, Tom Jones was rung up at his place of work to be told, that's what the journalists report, and how glad he was getting this top position, and so on. There's no hints of anyone being at the post office tower or of interviewing Paul Jones there. Tom Jones there. I don't think from the reports that anybody was there. That it was stilted and sort of constructed to look a bit as if something had happened there. But I don't. For me, that is strong evidence that Paul was gone by that time. Okay. So what happens then? Beatlemania is absolutely extinguished. From then on, it's just a memory, right? All the fans are suddenly betrayed, and nobody can even tell them why. Why cannot these adoring fans ever see the Fab Four again? And let's just bear in mind how the Fab Four always used to appear. They used to love wearing the same clothes, didn't they? The same matching suits, and they'd have been interviews together. Everyone loved to see the rap that the four of them had together in interviews. You know, the humorous wit, amazing humorous wit. Suddenly, that wouldn't happen again. The interviews are single people, and when the new guy appears at the end of '66, so beginning of '67, you see the new guy. They're all wearing different clothes, and none of the old Beatle boots. They're sort of trainers or whatever, and casual, and they're not interviewed together. You don't get any more interviews of the four of them together, and they're four different individuals. Okay, the whole month of October, I think there's no sightings of Paul, and immediately after that event, the remaining Beatles go off in different directions. Lennon goes off to Spain for a bit of filming. George Harrison goes off to India with Patty to do some meditation or something. Ringo then goes off to Spain to join John, as if they all want to get as far away as they can from what has just happened. Okay, and something has to happen pretty damn quick. And I've gone by the story here, an extraordinary biography called The Memoirs of Billy Shears. Now, who is Billy Shears? Well, old-timers will remember the one and only Billy Shears. How's it go? Wonderful to be here, certainly a thrill. And introducing the one and only Billy Shears. Who is the one and only Billy Shears? They no longer claim to be the Beatles in this amazing new album. They claim to be a Lonely Hearts Club Band, Sgt. Pepper. Okay. And Billy Shears is thus, and there's some later songs when it all turned bitter and sour that Lennon and Ringo come out with, referring to Billy Shears, Boogaloo, Billy Shears, in a scornful manner. Okay, make it clear they are talking about. Well, the replacement, we'll call him Fall, okay? The replacement for Fall. And here he comes in, initial name is Billy Shears. Okay? So he's called Billy Shears initially. Later on, they sometimes call him Boogaloo, back off Boogaloo. Sometimes people call him William. They decided his name might be William Campbell. But so let's start off. His name is Billy Shears. So this gives an account of that catastrophic event, that he gets picked up pretty quick by Epstein. Epstein has to do something quickly, and he has to act decisively to stop the thing going into newspapers when the crash happens. Now, did the crash really happen, you may wonder? Is it just an urban legend? Well, it certainly is an urban legend. For example, suppose you listen to Magical Mystery Tour, okay? Now, it was a much derided Beatle film, because nobody got what the point was. What was it about? Well, I was saying it was showcasing the new fellow, the replacement, Magical Mystery Tour, and it's sung at the end, Death Cab for Cutie. A song at the end, and it's all about the urban legend of getting in a car, driving too fast, and having the terrible crash. I suggest if that comes right at the end of the film, and I suggest you look at it that way. You interpret that song in that way towards the end, and you can see Lennon and George Harrison listening and smiling while they're hearing this song. So there's a lot of clue type songs about a car crash, and Paul dying in a car crash. Now, since my book was published, there has been an account of the Aston Martin that Paul owned. Paul bought it in '64. I think he bought two Aston Martins, another one '66, and I think the one was silver coloured. Now, Aston Martins are collector's items, and so they have a biography. If you buy an Aston Martin, a detailed account, and an Italian fellow has recently purchased an Aston Martin, which had its whole front impacted and smashed in, and was repaired. So this has given conspiracy theorists a bit of a new angle on this subject. Was this the very car that Paul crashed in? It might be. So there is a real possibility that an Italian fellow owns the Aston Martin car that Paul bought, that historic and legendary crash took place in, if we believe it happened. Okay. What the major evidence tells us is that the month of October, Paul is nowhere to be seen. And towards the end of October, Epstein goes into a mental hospital for some sort of mental hospital for treatment. Can be given some sort of drugs, and we're told it's depression of some sort. Well, that's very extraordinary. Normally, he's a fellow who can balance and handle things very well indeed. He's known for managing a whole stable of British bands, and he does take a lot of drugs, uppers and downers, but he normally knows exactly what he can handle and how to do it. So he's in a hospital being treated at the end of October, and the other Beatles have gone out of the country, and so we have a kind of total silence over what's happened to Paul, and the Beatles cannot play anywhere. They're not appearing anywhere. Okay. Then November, we get a dramatic twist of the story that the new fellow, looking very sort of shy and with a much longer face, appears. And he's come back, very strangely, with, he's close to Mal Evans, who is the Beatles' roadie. Okay? So, this big, hunky fella, Mal Evans, wonderfully gentle character, who served the Beatles faithfully, he is the first, as it were, friend of this new guy who's been brought in. The new guy who's been brought in is a versatile session musician. He's used to having different voices. In the Magical Mystery Tour, they refer to him as the man with 1,000 voices. Okay, through versatility. For example, you can sometimes hear him singing with an Elvis-type accent, so he has quite a variety of different voices that he can do and styles, and so he's versatile. He's used to covering different people and playing different instruments, and he's suddenly asked, can he step in as Paul? and it's incredibly difficult for him because obviously Paul was left-handed, and changing over from, to play a left-handed bass guitar is almost impossibly difficult. Okay, so in this book, which I think has inspired me a lot to write the book, he describes how the terrific struggle he went through to try to invoke the spirit of Paul to be able to switch over and play the left-handed bass guitar. Okay, why should we believe this book? Memoirs of Billy Shears. Thomas U. Harriot is a real person. A most special thanks to Sir Paul McCartney for his writings. And then the publisher is said to be a Macca Press, BillyShears.com. Now, I don't think that they'd be allowed to do that without McCartney suing unless they had his total approval. Okay? This has to have Sir Paul's approval, I would say, to do a book like this, and apparently be all about him. And let me draw to your attention that none of the Beatles really wrote autobiographies. There's a few scraps from George, but nothing you'd remotely call an autobiography. Why not? Why not? Okay? Think of the people around them who knew so much and could have told so much. Did they write accounts? Neil Aspinall, the Beatles biographer, he talks about how he used to beg Neil Aspinall to spill the beans. He's seen everything from the inside. You tell us, you just write some account. No, I didn't want to. So there is a mystery that none of them wanted to write ordinary biographies. I would argue that Neil Aspinall had a totally crucial role in what's called the disclosure process. Okay? In the 21st century, it's as if people quite old, before they die off, there's a massive amount of archive material they've got. The Beatle Anthology came out, which is all the approved okay stuff, but they had a massive amount of stuff about, as it were, the Beatles talking about this terrible struggle, terrible position they're in. They've got a newcomer come into the band, and they're not allowed to tell anyone, and they keep putting clues in their albums. So there's a whole lot of material that Aspinall has got, that and it comes out in a massive amount of web material that's been put out. A Rotten Apple series, so-called Rotten Apple, about 60 of them, and then the big 1.5 hour production, The Winged Beetle, and these are all anonymous. We don't as such know who's done them. Winged Beetle comes out September 11th, 2010, right? So the dates are quite symbolic and important in this process. So we can surmise, all I would surmise is that none of that would have happened without Sir Paul's agreement and support. You just, because it's got personal documents, it would have been total litigation if they tried to use personal information and private documents in the way they did. Okay, so the memoirs of Billy Shears, let me suggest, are Sir Paul's memoirs, but his lawyer has told him you cannot throw any light on where you came from, on who you were before. You are, for whatever reason, maybe some relatives or people who knew the old, whoever he was, before he stepped in to become Paul McCartney. People who knew him, it's a mystery quite where he came from, but he's not allowed to shed light on that in this book. Some people think, for example, that they talk about people like Phil Ackrell in the Diplomats, a band called the Diplomats, that Danny Lane was also with, who seems to have kind of disappeared around the right time. Could he have been? But basically, we just don't know. It's an incredible mystery where this guy came from, so this book does not tell us that, but it does give us the great struggle that the new fellow had to go through, and his genius of. He's a far more intellectual fellow than the old Paul, right? He's got a much longer face. If you remember the words of John Lennon in Magical Minstrel, you've been a naughty boy, you let your face grow longer. There was truly changing the face. I suggest anyone who watches that film, Magical Mystery Tour, you might need to be reminded yourself of what the old Paul looked like, okay? You might want to watch a film like Help. You want to see colour films of the old original Paul. There's been so much digital manipulation and fiddling of the faces by, as it were, the Empire to make it look like it's the same person. You look at the Beatles' monthly book, for example, there's a lot of fiddling of the faces. For example, they drew a moustache on the original Paul McCartney. Try and make him look a little bit like the new guy who, when he arrived in late '66, wore a moustache. That sort of thing. So I recommend watching films like, for example, Help, to get a proper picture of the very round, cherubic face that the original Paul had.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please do.
I'm quite interested to know what research you did in looking at the original Paul's mum and dad and the mum and dad of the, if we can call him, the new Paul. So did you go and talk to...
Well, you get Alf McCartney, who... No, I didn't talk to any of them. No, for goodness sake. I haven't met any of those people. The story here is that the family, I think Alf and the Paul's mum, their agreement was absolutely crucial. And when the new guy was being recruited, they had to ask those two if they would agree to support the new guy of being in the band. They would have to endorse him as if he were their son.
Yeah.
So that permission had to be got right away.
They might just have been a bit emotional that time. It just sort of seems slightly odd that they would, in the days following the death of their son, being willing to sign up to the sort of scenario that...
It does indeed, yeah. Certainly does, yeah.
Quite cool.
Yeah. Bear in mind that when Alf McCartney died, Paul, if I may call him Paul, right? False Paul. Paul did not go to the funeral at all. People thought, oh, that's so weird, didn't go to his father's funeral. And likewise, when Paul marries Linda Eastman, okay, it's a very private wedding, and the parents of Paul are not only not invited, they're not even told about it. So you get Alf and his wife talking to the newspapers saying, we have not even been told about this marriage. So when it was a personal moment for Paul marrying Linda, and that was connected with him leaving the Beatles band and getting an independent life, he did not want, as it were, those parents of the old Paul around. Okay. So that just shows the way they would go along with it up to a degree, but there was a limit to it. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Well, let's just come back to our story. We were trying to say how very quickly a new guy had to be found and roped in, and there's a lot of theory that there's an album that's called Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots, which cheap albums tend to be dismissed as a rather excruciating sound, but that is possibly full playing with Beatle type sound. They're like sub-Beatles songs that you get on that Billy Pepper and Pepper Pots. You get that music, which some people think that is what Paul made before he joined the Beatles. Okay, and that's what he says there. So that would have been done in studios in Kilburn, very near to where the Beatles monthly book was made, and so that could be a credible background of where Paul comes from. But, okay, but it does remain a big mystery. Okay, so the first photographs of the new fellow are in November when he's with Big Mal Evans. They're in Kenya. It's slightly obscure what they're doing out there. This is in November '66, right? And Mal Evans later released these photographs, much later on, after his tragic death, much later on. And the photographs show this early fellow who doesn't look really very much at all like became the Beatle. So the story of quite a lot of plastic surgery he had to have and Botox around the cheeks to make his face rounder and look like the old Paul. So he's in Kenya, comes back with Mal Evans in the middle of November and meets up with Lennon and the other three Beatles at Cavendish Avenue, which is where the old Paul lived. So the new Paul is going to move into Cavendish Avenue, and Mal Evans stays there a while to live with him. Okay. So, and photographs start to be released of this new guy. There's a press meeting, and I would say he doesn't look the slightest bit like Paul. I would say he's got a long face. He's got a moustache, and it's kind of baffling how anyone could think that he was Paul McCartney, because he's so different. Okay. Later in '67, he does get a much more credible resemblance, and the Fab Four in '67 can appear more in public and have more of an image. But to start with, this is quite a shy individual who is, as it were, brought very carefully into the into public view, and they turn up at Apple Studios and record stuff like Strawberry Fields Forever, and I think Penny Lane, and that's the first two they did. Okay, so they do studio albums from then on, and you don't. So assuming you don't really know who's singing. The question is, what is the voice of the new Four like? I would say, yeah, these albums, these are done with the magic of George Martin in the studio, getting the sound, and the time you really hear what the new fellow's voice is like is when he's left the Beatles and he produces stuff like Ram, I think McCartney, I think those are the two albums. If you listen to those, and personally I would say it's not such a pleasant voice. It's not terribly tuneful, and the lines are quite sort of rough sounding. It doesn't have the same enchanting sound that you get in the say the White Album or Abbey Road songs. That's when he's by himself. So you might want to look at those first solo albums he does when he links up once he's got married and he's left the Beatles and he goes off to the farm in Scotland. Okay. Right. Perhaps I'd like to talk about his girlfriend. Everyone knows the story of Jane Asher and Linda McCartney, and I find myself quite remarkable that half a century later you can talk to practically anyone and they'll immediately have these two as images, as real characters, and I think this is quite remarkable. Jane was the amazing child prodigy, wonderfully beautiful and talented, and when Paul first came to London, he moved into the Asher household, a very distinguished household, with Jane's mother as a teacher of music at the Guildhall, and her father was a very distinguished psychiatrist, and she's got a brother with also bright ginger hair, who is it Gordon and Peter and Gordon. They did a song that Paul wrote for them, wrote a lovely song for them, and so Peter and Paul McCartney sort of got on well together, staying in that house. So it was an amazingly creative household. Okay, when the other Beatles bought their own sort of millionaire type homes, Paul wanted to stay living there, and I suggest that was like sort of true love, him and Jane. They were an absolutely real couple. They were like rock royalty. They went around town with the Beat Elite, and Paul absorbed sort of culture through Jane, really. I mean, Jane wasn't into drugs. she was into sort of Shakespeare theatre stuff, you know, and acting in amazing TV films and so on. Okay, then I would say that suddenly, when this replacement is suddenly brought up, they are surprised how Jane and this new guy click together. Whether they're lovers or not, we don't really know. But she does like him, and I suggest that she's told by her father, look, you've got to go along with this. You know, this has got to happen, and if you can be with him, if you like him and be with him, that would give credibility, and it absolutely did give credibility. I think without her, people would have immediately seen this guy looks totally different. He's much taller. The new Paul was inches taller than the old Paul. I would say the difference between 5'8" and 5'11", something like that. And a much bigger guy. The new Paul was in every way much bigger. Shoes were bigger, you know. He's a much more strong, big guy. And we tend to forget how small the old Paul was. So was John Lennon, apparently. 5'8" or 5'9". I would say the debates are that those two heights are between 5'8" and 5'9". And people who met John Lennon kind of a bit surprised. He's a bit shorter than they thought he would be. So Paul and Lennon are quite short, and this new guy's much taller, and that is actually a major reason why the new Fool can't sing together with the others. If you remember the ecstasy of Beatlemania, you will always remember, say, John and Paul singing together into the microphone, okay, or Paul and George singing into the microphone. That was the amazing blissful harmony that they got. Okay, now that can't ever happen again because the new Fool is much taller. And if you see that rooftop concert they did, which is about basically the only thing that has ever shown visibly to the public of the four of them playing together, you're at a distance from them because it's on a rooftop. But I suggest you can still see that Fool is a much bigger guy than the others if you just look at that. And he's got a terrific black bushy beard, which I very much doubt that Paul would have had a big beard like that. So the new guy was much larger, and that's one reason why he couldn't appear together. A major reason why the Beatles could not appear together, and they had to be on separate microphones. When you saw them in the studio, so separate mics. Okay. So he and Jane tuned in quite well. And let's remember they're both actors. Jane is an actor, and Fool, if I may call him Fool, is also acting a role, which he's doing extraordinarily well, far better than anyone thought he would. He is moving in the identity of the passed away Beatle. If we may just quote the lines of Blackbird in the White Album, take these broken wings and learn to fly. That's like his operating instructions. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see. Just mull over what those could mean. All your life you were just waiting for this hour. That's right. Your life you were just waiting for this hour to arise. There's a moment to arise. Yeah. Okay. Now the one for poetry here means that everyone can give it their own meaning. That's the beauty of poetry, isn't it? It has a sort of universal meaning. It's not a factual statement. But I suggest it means exactly what Billy Shears says it means. That it's a statement about his instructions to rescue the broken bands. Okay? He had to step in and take this crashed out identity, and he was doing it quite well. And being with Jane helped him. And the mystery is, when it's 67, she accepts an engagement ring from him. Now wait a minute, let's backtrack a bit. Full has already met Linda, a Jewish photographer who's got this Queen of the Groupies reputation, and she told friends in America she was going to get Paul McCartney. He's already met her, a sort of quite intense interaction, and the story is, I'll just tell the story, that when she met him, she went over and said, I know who you are, or I know that you're not a Beatle. Who are you? You've got this terrific photograph collection of Beatles. I can see you're not a Beatle. So where did you come from? That was their kind of chat-up line. And then the deal was, she said, look, I want to be with you, but I want to be in your band. And she had basically no musical talent at all. Did she? I don't think she did. You could say just the same about Lennon and Yoko Ono. Brought someone into the band with no musical talent, but let's not get into that. Anyway, I would say it was the best possible thing that could have happened to Fall, because there he was, imprisoned in a false identity. Well, not exactly false, but an identity that he'd been told to work with, and he had done it brilliantly well. He'd got these supreme masterpiece albums that Fall had produced, which might well sell. I've got a suspicion these sell better than the early Beatle albums. I can't get any figures, but these are brilliant masterpiece albums that they come out with Fall's new inspiration. Okay? And they're so different, aren't they, from the old ones? There isn't the harmony and the togetherness of the Fab Four in the early albums. Remember that? Here, you've got songs, basically, each person, Beatle is singing separately. And is telling a story separately. And they're exquisitely blended together, but it's like separate individuals. Do you know what I mean? Telling their stories and singing their songs. I think this one, it's Lennon and McCartney were finding it, or Fall, they were finding it quite stressful to get on together. But anyway, they did just about manage to. Okay, so I was saying the Blackbird song is an expression of Fall coming in and rescuing the broken band. So he tuned in with Linda, who was far more his soulmate, you see. Linda was into smoking dope. She got photographs of, Janis Joplin, the Fillmore Auditorium, Jimi Hendrix. She's seen all these greats. This is what Fall, this was the world that Fall liked living in. Fall wasn't really into, Shakespearean theatre and stuff, and it was relatively stressful for him to be with Joan. And Marianne, we have a testimony of Marianne Faithfull. She went to visit Jane and Fall at Cavendish Avenue about how stressful it was, those two trying to get on together. She said she didn't feel it was very real. So it's always going to be baffling why Jane accepted an engagement ring, because as we all know, she was dumped a little while afterwards, and that was kind of like the ruin of her, well, I won't say the ruin of her life, because she had a brilliantly successful life, or you could call it successful, making cakes and done all sorts of stuff. But she was absolutely shattered, I suggest, by that, by accepting an engagement ring and then being dumped. Okay? So Fall's real soulmate was Linda, and the reason Linda won, with all the other competition going on, was that she wasn't asking Fall to be a Beatle. She was kind of understanding, look, you've done that job very well, but there is another identity you want to find outside the Beatle band, and I'm going to help you do that. And I suggest that she did that wonderfully well. They formed the Wings group, and she really helped him to move on and fulfill his life in a way that other girls weren't offering to at all. Okay? So Jane, this glorious diva of British youth culture, is suddenly dumped, and get this, a month later her dad is found dead in the basement of the Asher household, and he's murdered. Why do I say he's murdered? Because well, this is me checking the newspapers. The first report of Richard Asher is that the family say he's gone out for a walk and he hasn't come back, and he's rather absent-minded, and we're worried what's happened to him. That gets in the evening paper, right? Because he's quite a famous figure. And then, some days later, oh, forget that. No, his body's rotting in the basement, his own basement, and there are some bottles and pills around him. trying to pretend make it look like suicide. Well, it's very shabby behaviour. We never get the full story. I mean, I don't suggest for a moment one should believe that he was just ended his life in his own basement. No, that really didn't happen. He was not depressed. He was not worried about his children's. But what happened, let me suggest to you, was that he was horrified and shocked at his daughter being dumped like this, and under that stress, he's liable to talk. There was a secret that had to be kept. Now, in the Beatles story, there is a lot of people who die off. A lot. Okay, I'm not going to go through them all, but this is one case. Richard Asher, he's very, very disturbed by his daughter being dumped by a fellow after giving her an engagement ring, and he then gets bumped off. And not only does that keep him quiet, but it keeps Jane Asher quiet for the rest of her life. She will never ever say a word about Paul McCartney. No journalist can get a word out of her about Paul McCartney, right? And when she finally starts writing best-selling fiction books, they are deeply pessimistic, and they're about trauma. They're about buried trauma. They're about very, very negative human conditions and emotions, and about a car accident, and there's no redeeming feature in the story. Okay, they're about somebody having stuff in your unconscious that's liable to boil up and traumatise you. That's the kind of stuff she starts writing about. And she marries this savagely satirical cartoonist Gerald Scarfe. I mean, just think how different it was with our Paul, one known James Paul McCartney, the Orpheus of English popular music. What a different character it is to go over to Gerald Scarfe. Okay, so I've tried to show with these two women that I think you've got two such different women and you've got two different fellas. I think that's the way the story makes sense. Paul and Jane are then happy together, and they go off and they make albums. Okay, now would anyone like to ask anything before we move on? Any comments what we've done so far? We've just looked at the idea of a tragic death of Paul, sudden end of Beatlemania, a replacement, immensely creative new music that the four of them made with the replacement, and this relationship that with the two women. Any comments or queries?
Do you when Paul McCartney was in Wings and he wrote "Live and Let Die"?
Live and Let Die, yeah.
Do you think that was a sort of metaphor or a hint as to what had happened?
Could it be? Yeah. Could
Bond
that be?
thing,
Yeah.
You don't think it's
James Bond movie.
You don't think it's the novel title of it?
No, well, that was of course the yes, it could have been though.
What was that novel?
You don't think it's just the novel title by Ian Fleming?
Well, obviously it is a novel title by Ian Fleming, but the question is, why did he sing that particular song and make a great success out of it? And I think there could well be that many. Yeah. Okay. Now I looked at the metaphor. What I think is the metaphor of the Blackbird song. May I draw your attention to another wonderful metaphor that Paul uses? This is on the album called Band on the Run. And he talks about how with a mighty crash we fell into the sun. Now that's a very extraordinary line. Now there's a contrast between water and fire, the rain and then the sun. Well, the rain exploded with a mighty crash as we fell into the sun. And the first one said to the second one there, "I hope you're having fun." Okay? So there's a duality there, a switch over. Now, what an extraordinary image. There's some sort of trauma whereby whoever Paul had been is changed forever. And an amazing image. We fell into the sun, and it's we, the two of them together. So somehow the identity of the old Paul is, it's a bit like an identity transfer. And the new guy certainly had an amazing ability to remember details of the old Paul's life. He didn't always get it right, but he did have an amazing ability that spooked people out. to remember the old Paul's life.
I have to say, Nicholas, Paul was a master of the crappy lyric from time to time.
Crappy lyric,
The name
yeah.
of the album was Band on the Run,
Yeah.
so it was almost inevitable that he would choose words like sun and fun to rhyme with the one line that he had to have.
Well, anyone come to that? Okay, yeah, but I think you're
So
suggesting...
what is the point about these lines? What do they represent? I don't understand the meaning of it.
Well, his consciousness was seared forever by the change he had to be put through, and we don't know what that was. Maybe it was some sort of programming, but he could be amazingly convincing, claiming to be Paul. And let me add that all through his career, he's had people saying to him, you know, who are you? Who are you? Are you for real? Are you a clone? How did you step in? You know, what happened to the old Paul? Practically any time he's interacting with people, he's going to be asked that question, and he keeps giving all sorts of answers to it about who he is. So that happens all the time,
including "I am the old Paul," presumably. Does he ever say that?
Well, he would say words to that effect. Yeah, claiming to be. Yeah.
How would one have dealt with the...
Well, hang on. Can I just finish this?
Yeah, of course.
About I would say the image, the rain with a mighty crash as we fell into the sun. That is a surreal image. It's surreal because you've got the rain. Rain exploded. That's like maybe hitting the car window or something. But you've got a crash of rain exploding, and then you fall into the sun. So it's a surreal change from water to fire. I would say that is something seared into his consciousness, and the duality of one saying to the other, "I hope you're having fun." That is a duality that he always experiences in his life. As in, if you look at, say, the words of the long and winding road, that he's haunted by the memory of the other, who left him once on the long and winding road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, who do you?
Yeah.
Sorry. Who do you think organised this? And for instance, I mean, I can understand why someone might be motivated. Epstein or the others might have been motivated to not to let the party end, you know, because they were so successful and they wanted to carry on. But who would have organised all this? And would it have been done with estate involvement, or was it purely a musical industry commercial conspiracy? I'm not saying I agree with you. I'm just curious.
Sir Paul now is a high-level Mason, and he does give an indication that some Mason relative is indicated to Epstein that this thing was going to happen. You see, my book, I tend to tell the story as if it was a tragic accident, which is the way the urban legend always has it. A terrible accident falls on Paul, and Epstein has to act quickly. Okay, now there's another totally different angle, which the date September the 11th keeps echoing through this story.
It's pretty infamous nowadays, isn't it?
Pretty infamous nowadays. In this 21st century, it has a deep meaning. And supposing that is the date when he passes away, that then means, well, hang on, that date is chosen. It doesn't just turn up. So you then start asking, why would anyone want this to happen? Or did somebody want it to happen? Which, obviously, I can't answer these deep questions. I'm basically concerned to establish that it did happen. It really did happen. You've got a really different character, and all the Beatles songs acquire a whole new meaning and interest once you accept that it's happened, and you can appreciate the Beatles songs for the first time with this transfer. It does slightly involve the new Paul, or perhaps a lot involved, the idea of getting some psychic tuning in to the old Paul, is what he keeps saying in this book. He keeps indicating there is some kind of tuning. For example, I'll just read the words at the beginning from William Shepherd. Herein is an epic of our hero, Paul McCartney, who entered the underworld and then returned by taking possession of me, an unknown session musician. So that's sort of beautiful words, and what kind of sense can we make of it? Yeah, was there something you were going to ask?
Well, I was sort of intrigued with just the legal process when somebody dies in a car accident.
Yeah.
And you then have to actually effect, the enormous cover-up, from the policemen or the doctors, the nurses, the people who collected the car.
Yeah, right.
It's all. It gets out of control very quickly.
Well, Britain's
the
national security state does very effectively swear people to secrecy, and it was a capital offence then to breach national security. So it could order that clampdown quite effectively. So yeah.
And you think a state would be bothered to concern itself with matters of entertainment?
Well, I've alluded to that. This was an immense revenue for Britain, selling the Beatles records. They would sell in every country in the world huge amounts before the albums had even been printed. There'd be pre-orders, there were massive sales, and it was relevant to Britain's balance of payment, of avoiding the Wilson government to avoid devaluing the pound, that the Beatles, as the huge entertainment industry, that it continued. And it was Beatles and...
What percentage of GDP was it? I mean, this seems to me fairly vague.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't give a figure on that.
It can't be a huge concern to the economics of Britain. Why would a state be involved in the sad demise of an individual?
Yeah, well, I'm just quoting sources, Cameras, that it was then a very major consideration.
Yeah, but an alternative would be to say that the Beatles could have carried on.
Yeah, would
just with three guys, they could have imported somebody else, just like the Rolling Stones imported somebody else.
Well, they did that before. Do you remember? They originally had a different drummer when they first started out. And then they brought in.
I'm just questioning, why would a state be involved in such a trivial question as the death of a pop star? Not that this is essential to your argument.
Well, it is. Yeah, I'm saying that from the highest level of the state, the command went forth that the show had to go on, the band had to continue, and the image of that Britain was projecting in the world was somewhat linked to the Beatles. That this was more than just an ordinary band, and its well-being and survival was important to the image of Britain. Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting. Yeah. Right. Okay. Shall we continue? I'd like to come on, if I may, to the birth of the whole Paul is Dead story and how it happened. It was September, October 1969. Odd enough, it was in Detroit, and the story started to come out that there were clues put into albums. For example, Strawberry Fields, if you listen at the end, when things almost finish, you hear a bit of sound rumbling on at the end, and you distinctively hear the words "I buried Paul," sung by Lennon. And later on, after all the fuss and hullabaloo, Lennon trying to claim that he said something else, what did he say? Some absurd comment. They tried to claim it was something else, but you can clearly hear it was "I buried Paul." And then later editions, it's removed. You get it removed. But it is clearly there, and all sorts of other songs were found to have Paul is Dead type clues in them. And this came out in October '69 on Detroit radio stations. Okay, and it became quite a major story, right? And so the massive Beatlemania surged back with a macabre twist as people started buying the albums to look for these clues. Those clues, and so everyone was asking, well, where is Paul? Because if they just produce, I suggest, if they just had Paul available at the Abbey Road studios, people would have immediately seen, look, aren't you rather high, rather taller than the old Paul, and you've got green eyes. The old Paul had chocolate brown eyes. Let's emphasise that, that you can see in the early films. And Magical Mystery Tour, you're first shown somebody with green coloured eyes, and I suggest if you watch that, and you also watch the Hey Jude, watch him playing Hey Jude on video, you see a guy with green eyes which cannot be the same colour as Paul McCartney. Okay? This presentation is quite visual. You really need to see the images. I think that's what's important. So I'm just suggesting that you do this. If Paul had just been there in Abbey Road studio, I think that PID enthusiasts would have noticed that. It's also said that his accent isn't quite the sort of rough Liverpool type sound that the old Paul had. It's more of a trained voice, slightly higher, not quite so throaty. Anyway, he wasn't there, so there was a whole lot of suspense. Where is Paul? Which is a very clever bit of PR. So the question is Paul dead? Was the media were asking, well, please, where is Paul? And the Abbey Road people were saying, oh, well, he's on holiday somewhere. He doesn't want to be troubled. And then eventually Ringo gave them a map of this place, a farm up in the north of Scotland, and someone started going up there. We're talking about the 22nd of October, I think now, and Paul and Linda, with their kid, were going up there, and they were just somebody met them at the station on their way to the farm. So they were going up. They went up there, and then the journalists started to arrive, and they said, "Well, if you'll excuse us, we just want a bit of peace and quiet. You know, we're here. We'd like not to be disturbed, and we're trying to have." And there were two kids, one from Linda's previous earlier life, and one that they'd had together, so the kind of family unit there. And they had a very convincing angle, and a dog. Can we just be left to get on with our family life? Now that was a very impressive bit of PR. Actually, they'd just gone up there a day or so before in order to be up there and be able to have this interview up in the absolute middle of nowhere in Scotland. Okay, and say, look, we just want to get on with this our life here in peace and quiet. And make the journalists feel rather embarrassed at disturbing them. So that was the way it was all managed, so the journalists were made to feel rather embarrassed at having troubled him. There was also another fellow who was photographed here as being Paul, rummaging around that farm. I think there's about at least two different people, or two or even three different people shown in these pictures as Paul starts to then reappear on the farm, and he makes statements like, rumours of my death are greatly exaggerated, you know, and I'd rather be a little bit less famous now, if you don't mind. These very clever remarks. So basically the whole PID story fades away in America just because Paul is so good at claiming to be Paul. That's the way I would say. He has a totally credible way of claiming this new identity, so the story then gradually fades away, and it fades away for about 10 years. Paul is dead. Possibly it starts to come back again when somebody gets the clue to this drum here. You hold a mirror up to this drum and you get an amazing message which has apparently got a date on it, and he died. It's 11 9 in Roman numerals, and then he die. So I really need to show this, but just holding a mirror up to that, halfway up, reflecting it up, gives you, and then he die is pointing to, here is the new Paul, who's quite a bit taller, okay? So here are the old Beatles, where you can see somewhat shorter Paul, and here's the new where Paul is taller than the other guys, okay? There's a lot of symbolism here, so this mirror image of what was shown in this drum, which gives a date 11/9, gave a terrific reactivation of the Paul is dead story, and because it happened in America, it led to the belief that the death was 9th of November. Okay, because the Americans do dates differently from we are. So the sequence given there, there's a load of old books. For example, these two. Here are two classic old books. These have, I think, they're mainly dates, mainly 9th of November, as when the death happened, right? Let's say the Walrus's Pool. That is an early PID book. I think it's PID. He's got reservations if he doesn't want to commit himself. Whereas this book, Tell Me on Dead Man, is a very comprehensive look at all the clues, but he doesn't believe it happened at all. Okay, it's just the whole thing is just a gigantic cosmic coincidence, and it didn't mean anything, and didn't happen. And nobody organised it, nobody made it happen.
Where do you stand?
Well, I have an uncertain position that it certainly happened, and it had the result of immensely creative music. It may be the old Paul would kind of finished his creative work. He was a much simpler character. I would say the old Paul was a much simpler character. If you listen to interviews, say the famous David Frost interview he does sort of one-liner type replies that are quite witty and humorous. You know, and for myself, it's relatively kind of simple, that teeny bopper kids would appreciate it. Whereas when the new Fall guy comes along, you see him being interviewed in, what's it called? The International Times, you know, the new underground British newspaper that Mary Myers is producing, International Times, and there's a long 2-page interview of some quite profound and complicated philosophy about Crowleyite and magic and different obscure authors, he can ramble on at great length about just about anything, the new guy. So I would say that there were two very different characters. But I'm trying to answer your question: where do I stand? I can't answer the ultimate question about did somebody make it happen, or who made it happen, or why did it happen.
But you're convinced it happened.
I'm convinced it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I wrote the book, because I'm convinced it happened, and I felt we needed an English book on the subject.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This Fall,
Right.
what about his previous life?
Yeah.
What about that? Did that just disappear?
Yeah.
You know, his parents, his family, did that just disappear somehow? What about all that? He must have come from somewhere.
Well, there are one or two images, or sort of sequences of pictures of people calling him William. People who meet him call him William, as if that was his real name. He must have come somewhere. He talks about having Scottish ancestry and Scottish roots. And Marlon McIntyre song, a tremendous sense of belonging up there somehow.
But I'm just thinking it's really hard to lose your identity and take on another one, isn't it?
It is really hard, yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Unless he died in his previous life.
And it's really hard to play a 6-string guitar left-handed. You could do a bass, but I'm not sure you could do a 6-string with any proficiency.
I'm just thinking about this idea of loss of identity and taking on another one. You know, it's a proverbial almost impossibility, really.
But maybe it does happen, but we just wouldn't know.
Recently has written, someone you know, David Cole, has written a book on losing his identity and then being outed as now a false Symbolism.
Oh right, yeah.
So it's possible, but I'm not sure it's possible if you're Paul McCartney, one of the most famous people in the world. In the mid-60s would have been one of the three most famous people in the world.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, how is it possible?
Well, hang on. As regards whether identity shadow dice is too difficult, in a sense, we wouldn't know if it happened. I mean, how would we know?
No, that's true.
Can the Empire do things?
That's true, but the pressure on the person doing it is so great.
Yeah.
It's almost an unsustainable psychological pressure.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I'd say it was almost impossible to sustain that. Could you do it? Could you sustain that pressure of being someone else and losing that other identity that you had, that you must have had? How could you do it?
Being rich and famous, I suppose, is a...
Do you think that's enough? Do you really think
not.
that's
We had a
enough?
beautiful redhead girlfriend. He was rich and famous.
I want to stay in touch
He
with
was
my
given a
previous
lovely,
family, yeah.
lovely house, Cavendish Avenue. I mean, he had everything. He was given everything.
Yeah, but what about what he had before? What about what he was, really?
Well, perhaps it was rather anonymous and crummy, and perhaps he didn't mind leaving it all behind.
Maybe they found someone like that deliberately. Maybe they found someone who's
massive
left-handed.
good chance to
But
find
he
somebody who
must
looked
have
so
been-
like
He
him.
must have already been a very talented musician, because number 4, is a very talented musician. So you don't just, suddenly become. He must have been a talented musician from the age of 5.
Yeah.
Must have had a depressed left-handed loser with good musical skills, yeah.
And successful loser.
Nick, now on the inner sleeve of the White Album, there's an image, there's a black and white picture of a man who supposedly is full. What do you know about that?
That picture of man supposedly is full does look a bit like the early pictures that I mentioned taken in Kenya by Mal Evans before the guy started having any plastic surgery or operation. So that is the story that is what he originally looked like.
So they're trying to blow the whistle, the Beatles. I mean,
The Beatles were always desperately concerned to give out clues.
Yeah,
I mean, they were
symbolic
They were a
clues, not-
stressed and tormented band that could not be honest like they wanted to be with their fans. That was the predicament they were put in. I mean, Lennon was the great truth teller,
I mean, it's not,
and yet he was always forced to dismiss all the clues he put in. He'd say, "Oh no, it doesn't mean that. No, it doesn't mean that." Even Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. He was asked, "Was that to do with LSD?" He said, "Oh no, goodness no."
Well, isn't that another sort of train of objection you could follow? That Lennon supposedly quarrelled with them. They quarrelled, didn't they? At the end, that's how it was
they
projected.
did, yeah, certainly did,
and then all this vitriol came out in Lennon's first album.
It certainly did, yeah.
Like how do you sleep and things.
Oh,
How could
certainly.
he be so vitriolic towards somebody who, essentially he was just made to know?
Yeah.
I mean, I find that really odd as well.
Yeah, I would say he's in a very bad
Ru-
condition. But being with Yoko Ono and maybe he hated his existence somehow.
And projected it onto
yeah,
the second
yeah.
guy.
And maybe kind of wrecked his life with so much drugs. But he was, in a way, talking about himself when he said, "How do you sleep at night? You jump when your mum tells you what to do." He was a fine one to talk. But certainly, Paul did have to put up with a lot of abuse from Lennon, and he couldn't really reply because his position was so delicate.
That's what makes me wonder, you see, how you could sustain that sort of pressure.
Right.
I mean, it's just so difficult to believe, really,
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. Well, he does talk about it in this book about getting this unkind words from Lennon and how he had to cope with it. That he said he did love John, and those two, there was a lot of obviously working relationship stuff they'd done, but he felt it unfortunate that Lennon became so bitter. I think the other three Beatles were really pissed off at him succeeding better than they had. And the story is that him stepping in to mend the broken band was supposed to be kind of temporary, and that when the Beatles packed up, he would kind of somehow fade away. And that then didn't happen. He then became much more successful than any of the others. And there's a amusing when Ringo was, I think was it Back Off Boogaloo, Lennon and Ringo were doing, and there's a picture of Frankenstein on the front with smoking a joint and having broken free his chain. So they are trying to make out this character, the scoffing at, calling him Boogaloo, is a Frankenstein, an awesome, a constructed person who isn't quite real, but who's broken free and is going his own way. And they are
Doesn't
very
that
annoyed with
also just perhaps indicate that they were slightly antagonistic towards somebody who, in a sense, betrayed who the Beatles were?
that. How do you mean betrayed?
Well, the fact he was so well. Because he became so successful on his own.
Yeah.
Because he was the one who broke the story to his own advantage, that the Beatles are split up, and actually it was Lennon's story to tell.
Right, I see.
And
Yeah.
he was just 10 steps ahead of them in every way commercially.
Yeah, it was.
And
Yeah.
he had a nose for commerce, and
Yeah.
others didn't.
Yeah.
But I find it extraordinary that you can make out that it's two different people when, and everything you say suggests that, you know, he steps into the band that is accepted. He's accepted as the leading songwriter. There's more McCartney songs than Lennon songs after 67 on their albums, and yet you portray Lennon versus McCartney, the disputes and the fact they start to write their songs far more as individuals,
Yeah.
as an indication of their busting up, when actually it could just be an indication that they're maturing both as musicians and as people.
Right. Yeah.
And the fact that McCartney already is showing signs before 66 of being a parodist, so he copies other people's songs and distills them through the Beatles' sound, of course, whereas Lennon can't do that. And of course, after, you know, in the later years, McCartney is pure parody.
Right.
Again, which is where he doesn't become, he doesn't really write many songs from the heart.
What do you mean by a parodic song that he did? I'll give you an
well,
example.
When I'm 64, that's a song when he supposedly wrote when he was 14.
I
That's
see.
an old music hall number. There's that other music hall number on the White Album.
Going across the ocean or something.
I mean, many of his songs, and of course in Wings, he becomes an absolute parody. He just hears things and says, "Oh yeah, I'll do that." So he writes a song a bit like the Supremes, or the song he wrote for Cilla Black sounds just like some Motown act. But there's that element of McCartney's musicianship before 66, and yet how could you find somebody who not only can play the guitar left-handed, can also write songs, but actually has an innate musicianship which allows him to copy other people? So here, there and everywhere. I mean, what's that? That's a Beach Boys song, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, I think you're right.
Just as Back in USSR is a Beach Boys song.
Okay. If we may just perhaps come back to this mysterious Crowley connection, which is mysterious. It may be that both Lennon and McCartney were quite into the Crowley stuff, which involved, for example, writing stuff backwards and listening to stuff backwards, so to break the ordinary habits of life. That may be an influence. And McCartney at concerts, he does show sometimes the old magician in an image behind him when he's performing.
Crowley.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah. And he appears twice on the album, doesn't he? Can we see him? Can we see Crowley twice on the album?
Top row on the left. On the
Here he is.
left, yeah.
And
Back
then
row.
he's just lurking behind Diane Dawes here with his staff. You can only just see him. So he appears twice. He appears in duplicate, as the Beatles themselves appear in duplicate. And I think those are the only two characters that do appear in duplicate.
Peter Blake, the artist who did that, is
Peter
that
Blake,
name? Peter
yeah.
Blake, yeah.
They said it's Joe F. Grave, E-F-P-H Grave, who's a clearly non-existent character. So they ascribed, I think, the making of the drum to let me point it out while we're talking about this, that you clearly got a grave here. You see the newly dug earth, and there's a whole bunch of celebs standing at, it is a funeral. This is a picture of a funeral, okay? And you've got the Beatles, and you've got here Paul McCartney's left-handed guitar, and you can just see Paul, perhaps with a question mark, Paul, as well as the left-handed guitar, so there's quite a lot of symbolism here, and the idea is these are mostly people who have died, and there are people there to welcome Paul into the great beyond, a sort of welcoming party as he's passed away, so this is a magnificent depiction of a funeral party. Okay, right. Talking about Crowley, the winged beetle appears in 2010. Remember, it's September 11th, 2010. It's an hour-long video, which then becomes an hour. That is a 100-year anniversary of poems by Aleister Crowley, 1910, which is the winged beetle. And there's an image of the scarab with its wings extended that Crowley uses, which exactly then is copied by the winged beetle people. So there is a Crowley theme there, and it's rather bizarre what you're supposed to make of it all. But let me just read out, in 2007, so Paul McCartney's album Memory Almost Full had His Royal Highness on the back, His Royal Highness the King of Cosmania. Now what on earth was that about, the King of Cosmania? He says, danger to give thanks to the following people, and this gives a list of credits. Now the anagram, King of Cosmania, is Son of the Magician. Son of the Magician. And the magician has got a K in it. Magician.
Magic.
And that has to be Crowley. Magic with a K in it. Now that has to be, Crowley put the K onto magic, so there has to be a Crowley allusion. Let me just read McCartney's, perhaps I'll conclude with reading this McCartney, in 2007, My Soul, which he is a man, however you evaluate him, magic really somehow appears in whatever way it's important to him. Maybe it just means his way of inspiration. I don't feel there's anything dark about it. Crowley was quite a dark black magician. But I would say that with Paul, there isn't anything dark about it. People sometimes try to make out. So let me just read this word from My Soul. I long to know all your secrets. I want to walk through your fire. I was awakened by magic. I was alone in this world. Thank you.
Oh.
Right.
Oh, thanks, Dave. Do you know about the Abbey Road? And there's some clues in that as well.
Yeah, I missed out that, didn't I? Abbey Road. Shall we just do that?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's what it is. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'll tell you the ones I've heard, but you may have heard some more.
Well, I'll just talk through it.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So you stick this in somewhere where I'm showing Abbey Road, right?
Yeah, I can do it. This will do actually.
Right.
Yeah, go on, okay.
Yeah.
But there's
So tell me when.
yeah, you go ahead. Talk about it now. Yeah.
Okay, well this is the famous zebra crossing on Abbey Road, where I used to walk past it as a kid on my way to school. And you see now it's always a permanent throng of Japanese tourists around it.
Yeah.
And it's just near to the Abbey recording studios, right? And here you see the Fab Four. Now the story is, Lennon here is some kind of priest. He's all dressed in white. Ringo here is looking like the Undertaker. Paul here, no shoes on, is supposedly dead. And George here is the gravedigger.
Yeah, dirty jeans.
So that is the story, dirty jeans. And the story here of If, 29IF, which is supposedly the age Paul would have been if he'd been still alive, or something like that. So that is the story, and the not wearing any shoes echoes what you get in the Magical Mystery Tour. If you look at the album instructions or whatever in the Magical Mystery Tour, you see the four playing. They're singing "I'm a Walrus," and Paul hasn't got any shoes. and some slightly red bloody shoes are next to him,
What's,
empty.
He's out of
what's
step.
really interesting about that
Yeah.
picture,
Do show it, yeah.
if you take out another album
Yeah.
and you put it across
Yeah.
the heads of the Beatles,
Yeah.
you will see that actually Paul is absolutely the same height as John. So all this stuff about being a lot taller and they can never sing at the same microphone is not actually correct, because they're exactly the same height.
Oh right, yeah.
Paul,
Anyway,
I know it's
on
all.
that note, Nicholas, I'm scared.
This is why I'm
Makes
I'm undecided about all this, I must say. But I mean, I noticed that Paul's out of step with the others too.
They're out of step with the others,
See you,
yeah.
Nick. Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you.
Yeah.
Nick, he's out of step. The others have got their. He's got his right foot leg forward. The others all got their left leg forwards.
Yeah, and he's supposedly holding a cigarette.
He's got a cigarette, which maybe, of course,
Well,
everyone knows that's
not.
bad for you, and it's a killer and all that sort of thing.
What time of day was that picture taken? Do you know?
No.
Oh no, it was
Probably morning.
no.
I thought.
It's 1969. What day in 1969 was it? It wasn't September the 11th, was it?
I doubt it. Yeah, I can't tell you what day. Yeah.
So have a look at your book, Nick. Let me just show the panel of TV viewers your book, because this is important, ladies and gentlemen. This is the book which Nick has written, The Life and Death of Paul McCartney, 1942 to 66, and it's by Nicholas Colostrum. And so do get hold of a copy of that.
Yeah, some bits won't be audible where there's questions and comments, but you have to decide what to do there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just. I think we picked him up last time, so it should be all right. Yeah. Is everyone done?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, mate. Cheers. Thanks very much. That was Nick Colostrum, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, here's a few notes on what we were talking about during the lecture, with illustrations, because you need to probably see these images to understand some of the points that were raised. Now, this first picture here is a picture of Paul McCartney. It's one of the ones taken before 1966, in which this is what Nick considers the real Paul McCartney, and the ones taken afterwards are different, and he's going to explain why they are different, as he did during his lecture. So this here is the one definitive Paul McCartney, according to Nick and the other Paul is Dead researchers, except no cheap imitations. This is a photo of Paul taken after 1966, and now, according to Nick, this is what he considers suspicious, because he believes this person is different from the real Paul. This is Paul, the fake Paul, who was put in there as somebody else. So, have a look and compare the two pictures for yourself. I've got a few more, actually, that you might be interested in, which may give you a better idea of what we're talking about here. This here is a picture of Paul, a profile of him. The one on the left is the fake Paul, the one on the right is the real one, apparently, which were taken at different times. And I mean, I must admit, I would not... Yeah, looking closely at them, I would say they were different people. I mean, the shape of the nose in particular. It's also the position of the ear, the lips, things like that. I would... Yeah, I mean, this is one of the more suspicious photos in the collection, I think. Here is another. This one from the front is much clearer. Yeah, I think there is... Again, there are differences there. There's the... teeth are slightly different. Eye colour, again, which as Nick points out, the shape of the eyelids. I'd say the person on the picture on the right is someone maybe... I think that may be... Well, it's one's from Help, so that's an early one. And then there's Revolution. I think that was Was that a beat? Was that later? Was that one of the solo songs he did, or one he did with the Wings? I'd say that. See, if I looked at those, I'd say it's possible they were the same person, and the one on the right is 10 or 15 years older. And obviously, he's had his hairstyle differently. But yeah, it's and because the ear shape is different. Yeah, there's the ears again. So yeah, I mean, if you go to Nick's website, link in the description box, he's got a whole row of these photos, and there's a website called Digilander, which has documented even more of them. So check those out. Make up your own minds. Now, as you heard from Nick, he also believes that there are clues in the actual works of the Beatles themselves. There's some of the song lyrics, and some of the album art is very, very interesting indeed. And he thinks there are clues that have been encoded within the works of the Beatles. And this was obviously done by the band, by members of the band, one or more of them, and also perhaps some of the artists and other people who were working as part of the team. So this in particular, this album here is one of the most interesting. This is an album. This is unusual, actually. This album. It's one of the most. It's interesting and unusual because it's the one that's known as the White Album. It's released in 1968, and it's called the White Album because, as you can see, it's completely blank white on its cover, and its name, its title, is simply The Beatles. So it's known by fans and other people as the White Album. And it's what's peculiar about it is they obviously decided to put out the sleeve, the outer sleeve, the cover blank, call it. The title was The Beatles, and then the inner sleeve though is very, very different. Now, the inner sleeve. Now, perhaps some of you were old enough to remember vinyl records, but vinyl records came in. There's a big outer cardboard cover, and inside there was like an inner cover, which protected the actual record, which was this vinyl disc with the grooves on it, and the inner cover of the White Album is very, very different indeed. In fact, it's far from blank. It's covered with photographs of the band, from all kinds of different photos from different places, and there's a huge collection of some artwork as well. You can just have a look at it. It's a real collage. It's a complete montage, which is very, very draws the eye in, and needs to be studied carefully to take it all in. Now, what's the most interesting part of this album Inner Sleeve, is that there is a very, very distinct clue in here concerning the true fate of Paul McCartney, and I'll just point to it now. And here it is. It's this photo here, this tiny little small photo tucked away between some of the bigger and outwardly more interesting ones. There's something. This is very incriminating if Nick is correct, because this is one of the clues that has been put in, and it's a very, very blatant, very obvious clue, if that's what it is. So let's take a closer look at it. This is a photo, supposedly, of the man who became known as Paul McCartney after 1966. This is Fall. This is the imposter, the actor that they put in there as a replacement for Paul. This is, now some people say his name's William Campbell. He comes from Canada. He was a policeman apparently. He was also he also had a lot of other talents. I mean, the thing is, replacing Paul's not easy. As the guys in the lecture said, that people in the audience said, you know, you've got to find somebody basically who is left-handed, or at least can play a musical instrument left-handed, who is extremely talented musically, but has not achieved any public success yet, and is willing to give up their entire life, including their family and friends and everything they know, to start a new one. And it's not easy. But this is supposedly a photograph of the man who became Paul McCartney, which means it's a photograph of the man we know today as Paul McCartney. He's a guy who became Paul McCartney in 1966 and continues to be so and pretend to be so to this day. Now this, of course, is Abbey Road. Now, I mean, I did show you a bit of this during the lecture with Nick, but I just want to show you it again in more detail, because it's easier to do that right here when you can study things more closely on the video. This is very, very interesting. There's an interesting story behind this album cover, because Abbey Road, I think it was the second last or third last album that the Beatles ever did, and it was released in September 1969. This photo was taken in August of 1968, and basically it was done very, very quickly. There was only like about 5 photos taken. It only took 10 minutes to do this entire shot. The photographer basically stood on a stepladder in the middle of the road. A policeman just came along and said, "Look, can you just hold up the traffic for a few minutes? We just need to make this photo." And of course he said, "Anything for the Beatles, mate." So he did. and he took this photograph. Now, and it's a completely and utterly iconic photo. I think the person who owned that little white Volkswagen Beetle, which would cost maybe a couple of £100 in those days, because they lived in the house nearby, they managed to sell it for thousands of pounds to a museum. But basically, what's interesting about this album, it doesn't contain any words on there. There's no, it doesn't say the Beatles, Abbey Road. They thought, well, their fame is enough. Everyone knows who they are. They're more famous than Jesus, etc., etc. But now Nick touched on this, and I'm going to just mention it again. It's possible that someone here is trying to tell us something because of these costumes. Now, these costumes that the band are wearing, they were designed by someone called Tommy Nutter. I wonder if that's his real name. Well, could Tommy Nutter be a pseudonym for someone on the inside of the Beatles management structure who's trying to get the word out? And obviously the band are complying here. The band are going along with it. First of all, now, as Nick was explaining, this is essentially a funeral in effigy. What we have on the left, on the right, we have first of all John, and John is in this big white flowing suit, which does resemble something ecclesiastical. So you could say that he's the vicar performing the ceremony. He's the priest doing earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, etc. The next person on, of course, we have then Ringo dressed in a black suit, like an undertaker. He's got black shoes and everything, or maybe a mourner. So we have the vicar, we have the undertaker or mourner, and then let's go to the end first of all. Let's go to George at the end on the left-hand side. We have George dressed in scruffy denims with just casual shoes, so like a gravedigger would perhaps be. So he's the gravedigger. And finally of all, Paul, the corpse, barefooted, with a cigarette in his hand, which of course we know cigarettes are bad for you, they can kill you. And in this kind of like shroud-like covering, which almost looks like a one-piece covering, like as a shroud would look like. And other things you could notice is that Paul is out of step with the other three members of the band. They're all walking, striding along with their left feet forward. Paul has his right foot forward. So that's one of the kind of interesting things about this extremely famous image, in which it's hidden in plain sight. That's what Nick and the others are saying, that this is essentially a clue being put out there. Of course, the famous number plate of the famous Volkswagen Beetle it contains the word, I don't know what LMW means, but 28 if. 28 would be the age. If Paul died in 1966, Paul's 28, he would have been 28 at that time. So maybe that's a clue there as well, we don't know. But I just thought I'd bring that to your attention. And just to illustrate how famous this image is, I mean, you are not a proper Beatles fan until you've done this. Yeah, I mean, everyone, this is kind of like they've got real problems with traffic control and health and safety and accidents here, because all the fans do this. They come along and they cross over the famous zebra crossing, and they take photographs of themselves doing it. And Beatles fans from all over the world come over to do this. And some of them, as you can see, like these guys here, have actually dressed in clothes similar to the costumes, and they've adopted the same postures and images as the band originally did in the photographs. So yeah, so that just gives you an idea about how famous this image is, how much it's how iconic it is, and how perhaps things can be hidden. Things are not necessarily hidden by being secreted away somewhere where people can't see them. Sometimes the best place to hide something, or to even reveal something you want to reveal quietly without letting the people who are keeping the secret know, is to encode it into a very, very public forum indeed, which is what the band appears to have done in this case, if the Paul is dead theory is right.
Well, I'm back and had a very, very good time. It was great fun, as you saw. We went to the pub afterwards and had a drink with Dennis, who runs the shop, and a couple of the other people who came along, because there was a bit of a crowd there, so it was nice. Now, as you heard in the video, the audience was pretty much unconvinced. They were very, very sceptical indeed, with a C and perhaps with a K as well.
Nick, he's done this lecture a couple of times to people at Truth Juice, and they've been very receptive to it. This audience, I think, is he said, I think, is the most the most sceptical and doubtful audience he's had to face when doing this subject. And Nick is not a stranger to controversy, if you're familiar with his work. Now, I actually was the only person there, I think, who was undecided, and I'm still undecided. I was undecided, probably less undecided when I wrote the 2008 article. I'm probably more undecided now, but I'm still kind of vacillating over this. And I make no apologies for that. You see, because the other people in the audience, you heard their questions, they made some good points about the various problems with the logic and the various obstacles that would have to be overcome, the very reasons why it's not possible, or it wasn't done, or there's no evidence for it, and things like that. They do make some good points. I must admit that they have raised some questions which Nick needs to explain. But at the same time, some of the evidence that Nick presented is stuff that I'm not familiar with, and I think does also, need to be addressed. I think the people who do not believe that Paul is dead have to explain that too. I still don't know, you see, because I can't rule it out, to be honest. It just seems a bit unbelievable. I mean, the question, how many people would have to know? That's something I didn't get really... Did I ask Nick that? I can't remember. Obviously, I think Linda, his first wife, would have to know, because she met him round about the time this big switchover was taking place. And Jane Asher, his girlfriend, who sort of overlapped a bit with Linda, I don't know, but she's still alive. She would know. Obviously, like Nick explained, her father came to a sticky end. Paul's second wife, Heather, whom he divorced a couple of years ago, she wouldn't have to know, because she only met him in 2002. So she wouldn't have to know. Obviously, several other people associated with the Beatles would have to know. One of them just died, actually. He died what's his name? He died a couple of weeks ago. He don't know. He would have to know. And of course, Paul himself, whatever his name is, whoever he was before he became Paul, he would have to know. And ironically, he may be the one who is least aware, because the thing is, after playing Paul McCartney for all these years, for 50 years now, half a century of being somebody else, it's quite possible he has almost come to believe it himself. He may actually have, because our mind does this sort of thing, it selectively edits memory, so you perceive the past very differently to how it may actually be. I've certainly found this in my life. It's possible he's got so used to it that he may just recall his life before he became Paul, almost as one would recall a dream or a piece of imagination. And let's face it, he's living an enviable life. He's in the Guinness Book of Records as the most successful musician of all time. He's the highest paid. He's got the most hits. He's got, he is a superstar. He's more than just a superstar. He's like a super duper star. He's above all the other rock stars. And of course, he lives a quite isolated life. He's quite shy. He doesn't do many interviews. He doesn't have much contact with the public as some other celebrities might have. So he has that ability to maybe distance himself from any kind of criticism, or perhaps the injection of some sort of grounding, reality grounding. And also, I've got to point out that what actually happened to Paul is not without precedent. It has been done before. Now, I'm sure there's lots of this happens in fiction a lot. Of course, there's the story of The Prisoner of Zenda, which is a really good kind of thriller. It's a good book. It's been made into several movies about a king who is replaced with a double. But this has actually happened. I mean, it's well known that Joseph Stalin, the famous leader of the Soviet Union, he had many doubles. Saddam Hussein had many doubles. Now, if someone has a certain number of doubles, you have to wonder, I mean, would it be possible? You have to question, is the real person, these doubles are meant to be in existence? Are they a real person? Now, the actual provable case I'm referring to here it does not concern any kind of rock star, right? It doesn't even concern a human being. It concerns a dog. But what was done with this dog is exactly the same as what Nick and others are alleging was done with Paul McCartney. What happens in 1962, the TV show Blue Peter, I don't know if it's still going today, so maybe I think everyone probably watched that at some point when they were little kids, no matter, even if you're quite old. If you're very young, you may still be watching it today. Blue Peter's, I think it's still going on today. I don't keep up with children's TV, but apart from the Teletubbies, of course. But QV. But Blue Peter, of course, ever since it began in the late 1950s, it's a very old programme. They've always had animals, haven't they? There's been some cats and dogs and tortoises and other things, and they've always had a dog of some kind. As long as when I was a kid, they always had dogs. But what happened was, in 1962, that's when they first got their dog, when the programme was only a couple of years old. They brought in a little puppy called Petra. Little sweet little puppy. Introduced them to all the programme's audience. It was brought in front of the cameras, little puppy Petra, and all the little kids went, "Ah, sweet little puppy." Anyway, what happens? Sadly, Petra died a couple of days later, between when the programme had finished. Because these programmes, Blue Peter was always live, I remember it. Anyway, the producers were faced, what were they going to do? They would have to go on the next programme the following week and tell the little kids watching, the young audience, the heartbreaking news that sweet little puppy had now gone to that great kennel in the sky, and have them weeping into their after-school tea. They didn't do that. What they did was, they immediately, the producer of the programme just said to the team, look, just go out. Where did you get that puppy from? I go to that pet shop, just get another puppy that looks exactly the same, bring it in, and we'll pretend it's Petra. And they did. And the next week, the young audience met what they thought was the same dog. The team named it Petra 2. And this dog grew up fit and healthy and was a Blue Peter dog for many years. But it wasn't until 2002 that the BBC finally admitted that's what they did, in order to give the audience some time to grow up, and so they wouldn't be heartbroken. It took them 40 years to admit that they'd replaced a dog. So they're not going to admit they replaced Paul McCartney anytime soon, are they? I mean, Paul, I think, is going to live the rest of his life as he is. Whether if he's real or not. If he's not real, he's not going to come out as the unreal Paul, the Fall, in his lifetime. He's now in his. I think he's about 75 now. He's pretty fit and well. He'll probably go on for quite a few more years. But if we're going to find out, it will be after he's dead. That's for certain. And probably quite a few more. Ringo would then be the only surviving one, but he's like, I don't know what he's Ringo, strangely enough, he's the least famous of all of them. He's really kept his head down since they split. I mean, he's become a producer. I mean, he's really one claim to public fame since '69 is really doing the voice of Thomas the Tank Engine, those cartoons. So, it's not, in reflection, I'd say, in conclusion, still don't know whether this is true or not. But in conclusion, it is plausible. It is possible. Despite the misgivings of some of the audience, they may be right. But there may be an answer to those questions and those misgivings, and it may be true. But then again, there's another part of me that says, no, it's... why did they... Couldn't they, well, people brought them up in the... people brought these questions up in the lecture. I mean, why not? Why didn't? What if they got found out? Why didn't they just carry on with 3 guys? Why didn't they just sign up another one like they did before? Like they had another drummer before they had Ringo. So in the early days, they started out with a different drummer, and then they got rid of him and signed up Ringo. Why don't they just sign up somebody else? Why don't they just carry on with 3 of them and have this heroic tale to tell of? I mean, that could be a selling point, couldn't it? I mean, they could have like, yeah, they could have carried on with just the remaining 3, the Fab 3, they could be called. And then every anniversary they could have like a tribute to Paul. They could write tribute songs. It's like Queen. I mean, the band Queen, when Freddie Mercury died, of course he's the lead vocalist, they thought, well, that's the end of them. But they came back and they produced an album. They had some good songs on there, actually. The other 3 guys, Roger Taylor and John Deacon and what's the one? The one with the long hair, Brian May, yeah. And they had a song called Only the Good Die Young, which was a tribute to Freddie. And I could well imagine that Brian Epstein and the team, they might have thought, well, let's just do it. And as Dennis said, you know, this would involve a lot of state intervention. Why would they? I mean, were the Beatles really such a huge industry? I mean, I suppose they were an industry. Oh, you see, so unfortunately this video has no answers, just the questions haven't been answered. There's just more information. This has reopened the case. Maybe answers will come, in which case you will hear about it first and exclusive on Panwo TV, I promise you. Anyway, thanks very much to Dr. Nick Colostrum for that brilliant lecture. Thanks to Dennis and everyone else at the Albion Beatnik Bookshop. Thanks to all the people who attended the lecture and sat in the audience. And, of course, thanks to you, Panwo TV viewers, for watching. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, stop the New World Order.